Jacques, why do you think so many men don't know how to process their trauma and just suppress and push things under instead of allowing the emotions to run through them?
What I have found, having gone through a more severe trauma and actually living it, is realizing that what we were taught as kids from a societal perspective is incredibly important on our mindset. We've bought into the whole mentality of the John Wayne, uh, the uh, the idea that as an alpha male, you never show emotion, you are always in control. Society in general, what we find is that they don't want to hear about your little problems, and that's how they describe it. Your petty little problems don't matter. Your job is to support the family, to be the backbone, to be the rock. Showing emotion and showing weakness really is not acceptable. And that's starting to change. We are seeing some shifts in that. You see a lot of stuff on social media where that mentality is starting to change, but I don't think it's gone far enough yet. I still see it, especially people my age. I'm in my 50s. There's a lot in my era that's how they grew up, and that's what they believe still.
Yeah, so it's men being told that in order to be a man, you can't feel things. I definitely resonate with that. I'm a baby of the 80s. I'm maybe a decade or so younger than you, but I can remember messaging from a very early age of being told boys don't cry, right? I don't think it was until my dad lost his dad that I actually saw him shed a tear. I think some of that was necessary. Our parents' generation grew up at one of the toughest times, obviously multiple world wars. We don't need to get into all the reasons behind there. But what do you think needs to happen inside of a man to begin to allow himself to process and feel these emotions?
Acceptance from their partner is one of the things that we find drives it back down. When you are in a relationship with somebody who says the wrong things, right? Men in general are different than women, and women are trying to treat us like we are another woman. And that doesn't tend to work, right? Men are very different in the way we express emotion because we need to feel safe. Women need to feel safe too when they express emotion. But from a man's perspective, we need to know that we're not going to be vilified for it, that we're not going to be ridden for it, that it's then not going to be used against us later becomes really important. We need to be able to feel that safe space where I can express how I'm feeling and not feel like I'm less than. I'm less than a man because I have an emotion. I'm less than a man because I was in an accident in my case, or somebody who's been through a divorce where you're considered broken. You're not good enough.
Yeah, yeah. We're definitely going to get into your story because I know that plays a significant role and reason as to why you're even here today. But it's interesting. It's when you say there, it's men and women are different, and I think I'm curious what you think. I think a big reason as to why at least this younger generation is struggling so much with masculinity and understanding the role of a man is they grow up without real influential men in their lives. I don't know if you know the data, but 40% of homes are fatherless. 85 to 90% of educators are women. Educators are the people that are shaping both boys and girl through early developmental stage. So do you think a big part of why maybe a lot of men today struggle with understanding what a man is supposed to be is because they're lacking real influential men in those early developmental years? And if so, how do we change that?
Yeah, that's a big piece I see it within the school system. I taught high school for 16 years. And I taught in a part of the city that I live in, Regina, where it's very much a blue collar worker, but a lot of it is single parent families. And based on just how the justice system works and how things have worked out, who ends up having the kids? It's not the dad. The dad's got visitation. You maybe, if you're lucky, get 50-50. I'm divorced, 2 kids. I had a 50-50 custody with my ex-wife. So they had that male influence there all the time. But when you have a child, especially a male child who is trying to connect with another male, which is very different than connecting with their mother, when that male's not there all the time, and then you go, like you say, into the school system, especially elementary schools, predominantly female, no males. And maybe in a male principal, maybe there'd be the odd male here and there. My kids' school, there was 2 out of 30 that were male. It's predominantly female. High school's a little different. You can now have those years where you have males that are involved a lot more in the education system. But your formative years, like you say, your belief system is designed and was built between the ages of birth and age 7. Psychologically, you'll talk to any psychologist, they'll tell you that your belief system is developed as a young child. And you're stuck with that till you get older, until you start to deal with some of the things that you believe from a child's perspective that really don't fit an adult world. But if you haven't dealt with that, it's a problem. The feeling of not being enough is not being hugged, not being valued as a child because things happened with your parents trying to raise you the way that their parents did. While raising kids in the 1930s and 40s, 50s is very different than what it is in this day and age. So if you have a parent who's not progressive and just doing things the way that they was done when they were a child, well, it's tough. So a lot of times you find that things like Big Brother, you say, okay, how do we deal with that? Big Brother's an organization that is designed specifically for that purpose, though you don't see them predominantly in society as much as you used to. Where who is that male role model that these people are tapping into? A lot of it's social media now, because we're very much a technology-driven society. So who are they looking up to? Like, who are these male role models they look up to? Well, how many of them are still of the same mentality of the alpha male BS? And you wonder why we have trouble. The toxic masculinity that some people talk about, it's like, well, part of that's fabricated depending on who you talk to. But it's like, how much is the social media really driving how people are behaving now in the next generation? Like my kid's generation. My son's 20. He had me as a father figure. Well, he's one of the lucky ones, because there are a lot that don't have that.
Yeah, it's curious, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but you briefly kind of mentioned it there. I'm curious if you think some of this messaging, indoctrination, programming is done on an intentional basis, right? Is there a purpose-driven intention to maybe send some of these wrong messages to the youth? And if so, what would be the reason behind that?
Yeah, that one's tough. Because we don't know the real reason behind some companies' role within social media. Like, obviously, they're looking for the bottom line. They're looking for the dollar. So they're trying to gear things towards a certain demographic that works for them, right? Some of it's shock value. I get that. Media do that all the time, right? You see the news broadcasts, you watch the news sometime and to keep track of how many stories are negative and how many are positive. 95% are negative, because that's what sells. So they're going to glorify the negative stuff. So part of it stems from that, and with the media jumping on that from an advertising perspective to go on the same sort of bandwagon. And yeah, I get it. I understand how the media works that way, but at the same time, is you look at AI, the influence of AI now, and how they can make anybody say anything. Copyright infringement, protecting your brand sort of thing. You see people all the time. It's like, okay, I know that video is fake. It really isn't Arnold Schwarzenegger saying that. That's an AI created image that's being used to use him as this macho big guy that's from Conan the Barbarian era, from his bodybuilding days, and using that persona with a certain image to create that message. So it's a very toxic environment on social media. And unfortunately, kids are so wrapped up in it. That's, how do you stop that from continuing? Well, it's more things like this podcast, or the things that I do, things that you do on the side, trying to break that mainstream mentality and try and take it into a better direction of people being able to get the right information on how to get better.
Yeah, and that's important for us to speak to, right? Is I don't want to paint this doom and gloom picture that it's all evil and it's all toxic. You mentioned it earlier on in the conversation that the messaging has changed over the last 5, 6, 7 years. I've witnessed and seen that firsthand. We dropped this podcast in July of 2019, really sharing my story of overcoming porn addiction and kind of how things were evolving through that journey for me. And if you go back then, that conversation was like crickets. There was whispers. There was nobody having these real necessary truth-based conversations about what it means to be a man and the struggles that men are facing in today's world. And we've been able to witness it over 7 years of that conversation, resonating with the audience, being accepted, but actually a lot more people jumping in and throwing their hat into the conversation. So I'm curious for you. You mentioned to me before we hit record that you've spoken on over 100 plus stages. I'm curious what the feedback is when you speak on stages to various audiences about just some of these concerns with men's mental health and how they're processing their emotional traumas. Like, what is the audience saying to you? Sidebar conversations? What's the good feedback? What's, if any, of the negative feedback that you're gathering from people?
Yeah. Honestly, negative feedback, there hasn't been. Surprisingly, you'd think there'd be somebody. Usually when you start to get doing a lot of these, you'll get somebody who's going to have a backlash. The only real backlash I've ever had is 4 people walk out of my presentation because my story was too graphic and was hit home too close to an experience they have or they had to leave. And that's the only negative I've really had. The conversations I've had have been a lot more thank yous on not enough people say what you say. We don't have enough people willing to help other men who want to have the discussions, but don't know where to turn. They don't know where to go. They don't know that safe space of who can I talk to where I know I won't be judged, somebody who understands exactly what I'm feeling, exactly what I'm going through, because I don't believe anybody does, is the problem. And especially when I go and speak with police officers. I had one of those 3 weeks ago. I spoke to at a fundraising dinner. I was a keynote speaker, and I had somebody come up to me afterwards. I offered help to anybody who wanted it. I said, "You want to have a conversation? Be anonymous. Have your phone number blocked. Just call me, and I will not ask questions. Just say, do you have 5 minutes?" That's the key phrase. Do you have 5 minutes? And I know that means you want to have a serious conversation, but you want it to be anonymous. Perfect. I don't mind at all, but have a conversation. Right? Is being able to reach out like that, right? So then talking to this one gentleman, he's maybe 30, police officer, has seen enough horror stuff in his time. And he said, thank you. He goes, I really do hope some of these guys reach out to you because I know what they're going through because we have those conversations internally, but we really don't know how to help each other because we don't know the background. We don't know the self-care strategies. We don't know how to talk to them. We don't know how to help. Right. And it's like, we need more people like you who are willing to have those conversations, who've been through it, who've been through all the ugly stuff, gotten through the other side, and are now doing something with it to try to help other people.
Yeah, I have friends that are both on the force and in the fire department and paramedics, and I don't know if it's because of the nature of my work and what I do both here and in the coaching space with men. I've been able to provide space to them where the things I've heard that they've had to witness and the way that people treat some of these firefighters and paramedics when they're literally trying to save their life, like the anger that is given towards them. I can't imagine what they're going through. I know you may resonate a little bit more with that, with the story that you're about to share here, but I want to get into some of the strategies, some of the things that you've learned through the story, some of the things that you help people with. But I think in order to set some context for that, can you take us back to October 6th, 2021? I believe that's the date when maybe there was this kind of life-altering event, and kind of walk us through that story and kind of lay the groundwork for some of the things that we'll get into a little bit later here.
Yeah, absolutely. October, it was actually in July of that year, I got into real estate and trying to look at flipping houses. And I hired a high-end coach. And part of that program allowed me to spend an entire day with him learning how to do what we do. But he doesn't live in my city. I am on the prairies in Saskatchewan, Regina. Winnipeg, which is in Manitoba, east of us, is about 5.5 hours east. And I'm going to see him there at his office and to basically shadow him for the day. I leave at 3:00 in the afternoon. I head east, number one highway, major highway in Canada that goes cross country. Get into Manitoba. It's 8:00 at night. It's October, so it gets dark early. So 8:00 time zone change to 7:00 my time. 8:00 there, it's dark. It's pitch black. It's moonless night. I haven't eaten anything. It's beyond my supper time. Gas station, north side of the highway. I'm looking to pull in and get some food. But if you remember 2021, that's post-COVID. In my city, things shut down at 7:00 at night. So I'm thinking, I don't know if it's open. Lights are on, but there's nobody walking around, no vehicles. So it's it's hard to tell if there's somebody even there. The lights could be just for security. So I'm thinking it's probably not open. So I'm still in left-hand lane. Highway curves slightly to the right, a little bit downhill. I come around the curve. I never saw him anywhere near in time. 24-year-old guy on a pedal bike's riding in the middle of my lane, and I can't avoid him. I'm driving 120 kilometers an hour. So in American terms, that's about 75 miles an hour, give or take. And I hit him dead center of my car. I had no chance to swerve. I had no chance to hit the brakes. I hit him full speed. His body comes up, smashes into my windshield, bounces up and over, and lands somewhere in the highway behind me. My windshield's destroyed, so I can't see anything. I don't know where I'm going at this point. So I use the left-hand side of the highway to figure out where I am, hit the brakes hard, come to a stop, hit my flashing lights to warn people I'm there, and called 911. Talked to her for a bit. She checked me out. I'm uninjured that I could tell at that point. Flying glass, but that really didn't seem to do anything. I'm just flustered and just freaked out, to say the least. I just hit somebody. And she goes, okay, I think you're okay. I'm going, man, what about him? So I suggested, like, I need to do something. So I'm certified in first aid. My emergency first aid. I've had it for years because I'm a longtime coach from having been in a classroom as a teacher. She agrees, but the shirt I'm wearing, nice dark blue, and blue jeans on a moonless night, you're not going to see me. So it's dangerous. So she warns me to stay on the edge of the highway to see if we can find him and see what we can do. So I head back. It's about 75 meters back or so. And I find Jim. He's face down on the highway. And he's got his arm up beside his head. So it's hiding his face. So I can't tell if he's breathing. I can't see if his eyes are open. He's face down. So I can't see broken bones, no blood. I really don't know too much. But thing is, I can't go out there because of the danger of it. It's a high-speed highway. And just as I got to where he is and see kind of where he's at, call to him, no response, lights come around the curve. It's a mid-size SUV. They're white or gray, couldn't really tell with the dark. And I'm thinking, first thoughts are, great, I can get some help. So I'll just wave them down and they'll see us, no big deal. And we'll see what we can do for him. So I'm waving, trying to get their attention, and they didn't slow down. They didn't see me. More importantly, they didn't see him. And the instinct when you're driving is that you never hit something with your tires. You either swerve to avoid it, or you swerve to take it between the front tires. Let it pass under your vehicle, so you just go harmlessly over it, and you're not going to get into an accident. I don't know why they chose what they did, but they swerved left instead of swerving right. And they took them between the front tires. Unfortunately, for a mid-size SUV, there's no space for a human body. So they went over him at highway speed, and you could hear the body clunking out of the chassis as it passes over. So his head was here. It took him, thanks to laws of physics, because the friction with the vehicle, it grabbed him, flipped him 180 degrees, and launched him head first, 7 feet in the air, 50 feet down the highway, like an arrow. Launched him like an arrow, head first, following him behind the vehicle. Eventually, body loses momentum, obviously, comes down to the ground, hit the ground, rolled, and was laying across the right-hand lane. The SUV braked for about 3 seconds, hit the gas, and left. They never stayed. They panicked. They likely don't know that I was the first collision. So they thought they hit somebody and, okay, I'm in serious trouble. I'm just going to leave. They left instantly. Didn't delay, just gone. And we never heard from them. They never checked back in, nothing. We have no idea who they are. At this point, I'm still on with 911. I'm chatting with the operator, giving our play-by-play as this is happening and basically freaking out. At this point, we both go quiet, both really not sure what just happened. It's just a shock of it. Eventually, she comes back on and tells me to get back to my vehicle because if my collision didn't kill him, that absolutely would have. It would have broke his neck. He's dead. There's nothing you can do for him. I can't administer first aid in any way that's going to help at this point. His body's going to be a mess. So I'm walking back towards my vehicle. I haven't gotten to the body at this point. It's been less than a minute, and big sound comes from behind me. Lots of lights. I turn around to see a semi with a flatbed trailer coming down the highway around the curve. and the body's in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I know you can't move a vehicle that big, that quick. So I'm waving, screaming at this guy, trying to get his attention. He saw me. He took his foot off the gas. You get that hunk, 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 hunk sound of a diesel engine when the power's powering down. So I know he saw me, but he couldn't avoid the collision. So it's collision number 3. Driver's side tires took the body across the pelvis. The front tire got him. So I only heard one clunk. I couldn't physically watch it happen, so I turned away. But I heard one clunk, which would have been the front tire, and then nothing after that. When it hit him, it flipped him sideways towards the center line of the highway again. So when the vehicle had gone through, I heard the clunk, kind of waited. I looked up and I see him lying in the center lane again, center of the highway again, perpendicular to traffic. Truck stopped up near my car, but I didn't talk to him. I went straight to my car, got in and just waited for the 911 to send help. I could see the flashing red of his taillights in my broken windshield as I'm sitting there. I eventually see the red and blues show up with 2 ambulance that came. They blocked off the highway. I got out to meet them, and the semi left. Never came and talked to me. They left, and we never heard from them again either. They panicked, likely thinking the same thing, not realizing that they weren't the first, right? They panicked. What's their life like? I'm not sure. Probably not good because they don't know the whole story. I was the only one who does. And then from there, it was giving my testimony, to giving some information to the police officer, the corporal that was there, and then telling my story again to the EMT, telling it again to paramedics. Ended up telling my story 4 times after that, reliving it really close after when it just happened. And I'm already in shock at this point. My heart rate's really high. My blood pressure's really high, not coming down. And I was there for 3 hours, waiting, letting them do their testimonies to get, not testimony, but their investigation on what they're doing. And we found out at that point when I talked to the EMT, she goes, "You realize you're bleeding?" And I'm going, "What are you talking about?" And I look at my right hand. I embedded a piece of glass in my hand. When I put my car in park, I grabbed the chunk of glass from my broken windshield and embedded it in my hand and never felt it the whole time. So I was bleeding blood down. I had blood on my pants, blood on my shoe, blood on my phone from using it, and had no idea. Right. So that's the shock part of what happens when something traumatic happens. Right.
Yeah, that adrenaline has kicked in. I would assume, it's such a shocking story. I didn't grow up in a super rural area, somewhat in the suburbs, but there's farmland and there's a lot of open land around where I grew up, and you'll see deer on the side of the road frequently, right? Occasionally you'll see one. And, I think I've been in one incident. For some reason, my brother, they're like after him. I think he's been hit like 6 times, where usually they run into his car. Was there any thought, I guess, for you, like, did you immediately know that you had hit a person, or were you thinking this is a big animal potentially?
Yeah, valid question. And this is part of the story that I tell people. They don't realize that the human brain does things that you cannot even imagine it's capable of. When you're in a situation where you're under a tremendous amount of stress, I saw him for a split second. It was less than a second before I hit him, right? And I can tell you in minute detail exactly what he looks like. And the picture, the cover of my book is a recreation of what I saw before I hit him. I can tell you everything about him. He was at a 45-degree angle away from me. His head was pointed down. He wasn't wearing a cap. He had short, dark hair. He has a dark blue sweater, zip up the front, about 3/4 of the way up. White long sleeve shirt underneath. Black sweats, black shoes. He's wearing a silver bike it's whole beat up bike. It's got no reflectors on it, no reflectors on him. And he's not pedaling. And he's not looking at me. So what does that tell you? Then, like Paul Harvey would say from the old radio show, and now that's the rest of the story. We found out from the investigation that they did some background checking on who this guy is and everything, where he's from. And he's from a nearby city, half an hour away from where we were. We're in the middle of nowhere, no town, no nothing. Why is a guy on a bike in the middle of nowhere with a moonless night, right? He's in the left-hand side of the highway. He'd gone from the left side out in front of my car and coasted. What's your instinct as a human being when you're on a bike and you're trying not to be hit? What's the very first thing you do? Do you look back to see what's coming so you can avoid it? He didn't do that. He wasn't pedaling. He wasn't trying to get away from me. So the police officer is the one who came up, who told me the next morning when I spoke with him, he goes, we are almost 100% sure that what he was doing was committing suicide. And it had absolutely nothing to do with you. There's nothing you could have done to avoid it because he was there with an intent. Now, we can't tell you with 100% certainty because you don't know everything, but he goes, there's just too many things pointing in that direction that this was an act that was entirely based on what he was doing. I was never charged with anything. I was released the next morning to go home somehow. I had no car. I had no way of getting home. So that was a whole story itself. But that in and of itself creates another dynamic to the story, to how far he must have fallen in his own world to push himself to do something like that, that would drastically impact somebody else's life.
Have you spoken to the family?
That's an interesting question. It's one I've only ever heard actually once. And for me, at the point in time that it happened, I could find out who he is without too much difficulty. Read a newspaper. All it would take for me to do is take the major newspaper in that area, that time frame, look in the obituaries, find somebody of that age, and it wouldn't be hard to figure out who he is. I can honestly tell you, I have no idea what he looks like because I never saw his face. My accent, I never saw his face. And I've never tried to find out who he is. That's an emotional piece that I wasn't prepared for at the time. And I'm not sure I'm even now, 4.5 years later, I'm not sure I'm prepared for that. Because for me to reach out to the family, what's the one thing I know that's going to happen? What's the family going to ask? They're going to ask why. They're going to ask, why did this happen? What could you have done to do it differently? What could you have done? I beat myself up enough as a guy. That's one of the biggest things that I struggled with for 10 months after the accident was the what ifs. What if I had stopped for food? What if I had left home sooner and been through there in daylight? Maybe this accident wouldn't have happened. What do all the what ifs in the world do for you? Nothing. All it does is beat myself up on why was I not man enough to stop him from dying? Why didn't I go out after I hit him? Why didn't I go out on the highway, grab him by the arm and drag him off the highway so the second vehicle didn't hit him? Why didn't I do that? Because at the time I was basing my decision on the information that I had and the time frame I had. I had less than 30 seconds to make that decision. And 911 operator who I trusted said, don't do it. Stay away from him. Based on circumstance, I did the best I could. Am I going to beat myself up over it, over somebody that it appears was there with an intent? No, because that's not the right thing to do. Not for my world. I spent 10 months with a fear of telling people. I didn't tell people for a long time. I told my boss, I told those closest to me, my immediate family, my closest friends. I told nobody else for 10 months. Why? A fear being labeled. Fear being labeled a killer and being blamed. So your question's a very valid one, but it's that same fear that stopped me from ever trying to find out who he is and what his real story was, or ever talking to the family, because I don't want to be blamed for something that wasn't my fault. Even if he wasn't there intentionally, I couldn't have avoided him if I wanted to. Laws of physics, I talked to the police officer after and he goes, there's no way you could have avoided him, right? I understand the physics because I was a physics teacher. I get the math, right? The math is really clear. Your headlights are maybe, if you're lucky, because a curve makes it harder, but 200 feet is about the max of headlights of a vehicle. It takes 3/4 of a second for a human to recognize what they're looking at, especially when it's in the dark. It takes another 3/4 of a second to physically act on that response that your brain recognizes. So it takes 1.5 seconds. When I'm driving 120 kilometers an hour, how far do I travel in 1.5 seconds? 160 feet. My headlights illuminate, maybe if I'm lucky, 200. So what's the math tell you? There's nothing I could have done. Not a thing. That's why they didn't charge me with anything. I couldn't have avoided him if I wanted to. Daylight, okay, I get a lot more light. I can see him way in advance. That's a different story. But when it's a pitch black night and you have no light source and you're trying to avoid something in the highway, it's not happening.
Yeah. And there was no ill intent behind the question. I was just curious because as you were unpacking that story and, you got to the point where you had mentioned that he was there kind of intentionally on purpose. I was just curious if through it, if there was any healing that was found in speaking to the family, because maybe they would be able to share where he was. And maybe I thought maybe that was kind of the motivator to begin to step out and speak to these things. Cause I'm curious for you, you mentioned for 10 months not being able to talk about the journey. Something shifted though. You've overcome that fear. You wrote a book on it. You've spoken 100 plus times. You now go on other podcasts and share this to raise awareness. We're here in the month of June, Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, which is a big reason why I wanted to bring you on, because I want to facilitate these conversations and give the listeners and the audience hope, opportunity, awareness that whatever it is they're going through, the healing is found in actually shining the light on it. But I'm curious for you, are you motivated because of what sharing has done for you? Or are you trying to speak to where he was prior to that guy getting on the cycle that night? Or is it both? I don't even know if the question makes sense.
The suicide angle is a different one. I haven't touched that one yet, though I have somebody that I know who does talk about suicide and everything. And he and I have talked about doing some joint work together on workshops where I take the other side of the story that nobody talks about. When somebody uses vehicular or uses any other means where somebody else is involved with their death when they're intending to end it, what impact does that have on them? And that's the part of the story you don't hear a lot about. It's something fairly unique. So it's one that I could take a different perspective with and bring to that story. For me, I looked at it from my end of things. I'm trying to make sure I get to a better place. One of the things that happened after the accident, that whole fear kicked in hardcore. My stress level any given day is a 6 or a 7 out of 10, constant, doesn't stop, doesn't change. It takes nothing at all to take me to a 10. And when you put somebody under a stress level of 10, what's their initial instinct? Hide. And the reason why they try to hide, the reason why they try to escape is to escape the pain. And my pain was daily, every day. And I needed to find ways to cope with that. I went through neurolinguistic programming through a life coach, which helped tremendously, NLP, being able to relive the experience and be able to control my physical reaction. There's two reactions that happen with trauma. There's the physical and there's also the mental. Your brain controls your body. Everybody believes that, but there's those who don't understand that your body controls your brain. When your body has a reaction to a trigger and goes through a certain state, it changes the way your mind works. So it does work the other way as well. For me, my first process was to control my body first, and then I'll try to deal with my brain more. So neurolinguistic programming helped me do that. In looking at what happened with triggers, my stress level is 6 or 7. So it's something minorly stressful at work. For example, I get an email with somebody criticizing something we're doing and normally would do basically nothing. But in the state I'm in, took me to 10. What physically happens to me as soon as that happens? This understanding a trigger, right? You don't understand, you don't believe you're in a trigger until it really happens. You can't see them coming, right? Something that clicks. What it does, it puts me in the same state I was in at that time of the accident, exactly identical. So it flips me back into that time frame and go, okay, heart rate up, blood pressure up. You have that the solar plexus right where that bottom of your rib cage is, right in there where your diaphragm is that big heavy ball of lead that sits in there and hurts and won't stop. That's what I was like after the accident. So when I get triggered, that's the state I end up back in. I calm myself down. I use breath work. I use what I need to get myself calmed down. I get better, triggered, right back there again. So it's a vicious cycle over and over and over. And we're not talking once every 3 or 4 days. We're talking multiple times in the same day that would happen. And some days it got so debilitating that for me, my safe haven was work, understanding myself well enough. I've been in personal development since 2012, from back when my life was falling apart then too. But all that learning I did on self-development, it helped some, but I'd never experienced a trauma. So this was a totally different PTSD world than anything I'd experienced. But I knew enough about myself that being alone was something I could not do. That was dangerous. I needed to be exposed to other people in some way. I worked in an office where there's cubicles. So it's the best of both worlds. I was off work for 1 week and I was back to work. And my boss knew, nobody else knew. I hid it. I could be in my cubicle, be alone, and people leave me alone. I don't work with other people that often. So let's see, post-COVID, everything's online. But I also have the ability to leave my cubicle to get human exposure if I needed it at any given point in time. They didn't need to know why. I just needed to be able to have a conversation with somebody to feel normal again, because I wasn't feeling normal. I lost track of the number of days that I would break into tears at my desk because I would collapse. But I never left because it was my only safe haven I knew. Other than the gym, that's the only place I knew where I felt safe, where I could have that happen and people wouldn't notice. And no one did for months, 10 months.
Yeah, you mentioned this fear-based media news outlet that we have, literally screaming at us in our pockets 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is when we're caught in these cycles, the physiological and biological response is the same that it would have been in a case like what you went through, or hundreds, thousands of years ago when we're being chased by a tiger kind of in the Sahara, right? It's like our perception of these events biologically wise is exactly the same, even though it's just on a screen. We can't correlate the difference between that. And I think that's where so many men get caught up in these cycles, and they use these escape mechanisms and coping mechanisms, oftentimes in very unhealthy ways and patterns. I'm curious on the NLP side, because, I have a base level understanding of it. I think most people, when they think about it, it's obviously linguistic, right? So it's a language, right? Oftentimes it's taught in sales, persuasion, and influence circles. How was NLP productive and helpful for you in processing trauma?
It took a lot of sessions to get to the end point because it was PTSD. So it's pretty severe. The initial stages was a 10,000 foot view of what happened, right? So I started at 10,000 foot view and I start describing to her what's happening and me watching a movie screen. It will get to a point where I'll get too close to what happened and I have a physical reaction. So I stop. She goes, stop, take 2 steps to your left. Calm, bring the emotion down, come back, step back to the right, step back to where you were with the story. Okay, let's continue a little farther. Reaction, nope, step away. Is basically trying to disconnect the physical reaction from what actually happened. It's making that separate. That's why the step sideways to get away. Okay, and then do that over and over. Do that for like half an hour. And then when I first started, it was multiple coming back. Like it was hard. But over time, I was able to get through the story. Then the next time would be, okay, let's get a little closer. Now I'm only a 5,000 foot view. Do it again. Then I'm 1,000 foot view. Do it again. I'm 100 feet. I'm off back down the highway. Then I'm closer to the accident. And then eventually I get to a point where I'm physically in the accident scene as a viewer and being able to go through the story and control the emotional and the physical reaction of what happened. Now, the emotional part is really tough. Even when I tell my story now, I'm very careful not to dig into the emotion. You notice when I said it, I didn't talk a lot about emotion. I have to be careful. I understand that. PTSD is not going to be away very easily, right? 4.5 years, it really isn't a long period of time. If I immerse myself in the emotional part, I start to feel it. And I'm careful not to let myself get to that point. So it's a healing process. It takes a long time. No 2 people are the same. NLP may not do anything for some people. And I am very clear on that. What helped for me may not necessarily help for you, but it's another tool. Look at the tools of what could help.
Is the goal in these sessions, as you're replaying this event, to rewrite your visual and emotional perspective of what is taking place? Like, are you trying to replay the story to rewrite the narrative behind it?
What happened based on fact. I can't rewrite anything, so I can't go back. That's the whole what if programming, right? I can't go back and change what happened.
Your perception of it.
My perception, yeah. Especially with him, especially me knowing that there's a very high likelihood that he was there intentionally. Takes the blame away. The blame piece becomes easier to handle. The bigger picture for me in telling my story is so people understand that this is what I went through as a lived experience. And there'll be others who have been through something worse. And I know people who have been. I've heard some of those stories, right? But it's not my goal to one up somebody. It's not my goal to sensationalize what happened. I tell my story from a graphic sense so that people understand that you can go through something really, really hard like this. But there's lessons to be learned with anything. There's no such thing as failure. You either succeed or you learn. Failure isn't an option. And it hasn't been in my case since the beginning of doing this. Or I don't see the accident as being something that I regret, because I don't. I see it as an opportunity for me. I went through my own living hell for almost a year, trying to get through what I went through and to learn the things that I learned. Becoming a voracious reader and reading 56 books in 1 year, 55 of them on personal development, right? On learning the things I need to learn to get better and to be able to now use my experience. Yeah, it's gory and people kind of sensationalize it to a certain extent, but it captures their attention, which isn't a bad thing. Say, okay, how did you get through that? And that's the part they're interested in. And that's the part I talk about in my book and I talk about in sessions I give now, that I'm in a counseling once a week at that point. I'm not anymore, but it was at that point once a week, an hour session. Okay. What about the other 6 days and 23 hours? What the heck am I doing for me? How do I control everything else going on in my world when I do not have my counselor on speed dial? Because it doesn't work like that. Who do you talk to? Your counselor is not an option. You can't do that. That's not how it works. So who do you talk to? Who do you trust? Who's your circle of influence that you can trust, that you can rely on, that you can bounce ideas off of, and you can actually start to learn how to communicate about what happened. That's the first thing I had to learn.
What were some of the key self-care habits, routines, tactics that you had to put in place? You mentioned, I'd been deep into personal development since 2012. This is a decade later. So we have this base level of knowledge that's embedded within us. But then we go down this journey. We have this traumatic experience. It shocks us. We're struggling with PTSD. Now we're kind of having to relearn a lot of these things, 56 books, 55 of them being in the self-care, personal development space. What were some of the key takeaways for you through this journey that in terms of like the actionable things that you were putting into place in your life?
Yeah. Living in the past kills you. One of the first things I had to do was stop living there and start living in the moment and living in my future. And looking from a timeline with three perspectives, right? There's the left, which is the past, and it's not pretty. But can I change it? No. Let it go. Can I impact the present? Yes. I can impact the present by being there and being in the moment with people, right? And being able to have conversations, to be able to deal with things in my life and living in the now. And then having goals to be able to, okay, where am I going? If I don't have a goal to shoot for, especially from a man's perspective, men are driven by purpose. For me, it took a while, but once I wrote my book, I decided that there needs to be a bigger purpose behind this. And that's when I made the decision to become a life coach. I'm a certified life coach. I'm a group and personal life coach. I'm also a workshop facilitator. I took training in that too. Took 3 trainings. And then from there, I started public speaking because I love public speaking. I love spreading my message and getting used to saying my story to help other people understand that you can go through garbage in your life. You don't have to let it define you, because it doesn't. This accident didn't define who I am. I am not a killer. I'm not a bad person because this person died. I had to get through that first, got through that. then started doing the work that I needed to on a daily basis. The last thing you think about 5 minutes before you fall asleep is what your subconscious takes and works on all night long. So what were my mornings like when the accident is on my brain? It's hell. My mornings were hell every single day. So I had to change it. So I would be careful what I thought about before I go to sleep. Be very careful. I always think positive things. I did affirmations and did those sorts of things before I went to sleep to stop my brain from concentrating on the negative. Wake up in the morning, meditation first. Calm my mind down, calm my body down. Number 2, a little bit of light exercise will sometimes help to get your body flowing a bit. Journaling, being able to, if you can't speak it, at least write it. Write things down, because you start to recognize patterns when you start to write things down. This seems familiar. You start to recognize patterns in your life of what you need to change to be better. And part of what I did with my writing is the affirmations as a part of it, right? And recognizing that, okay, this is something that this is me in a positive sense, and the way I view myself. Your perception of things has to change. My perception of me being a bad person and a killer is not one that's going to help me. So I had to let that go. What's my perception? What's my view of myself? Your view of other people of you is irrelevant. That's their perception. It's their business, not yours. You don't worry about what other people think. Who cares? Doesn't matter. If you're going to have that perception of me, then you're no longer my friend. And I ended a couple friendships because of what happened. Because you're not serving me. You're not helping me. The blaming doesn't happen in my world. No, I stay away from it. For me, it's everything's positivity and looking at things from a different perspective, that what's going to help me move forward and progress to be better in the end.
Yeah, no, I think that's so crucial. Everything you said there, anchoring the morning in, but really understanding that your morning starts the night before you go to bed. So, how are you bookending those days? Are you making sure that you're controlling and regulating? I mean, you said 5 minutes, 30 minutes prior, and then in full control of the first 30 minutes. I also think it's important for all men, and this is something we speak heavily about, is having that aim that we're working towards, right? Positive emotion can only be a byproduct of forward progress towards a desired outcome. So we need to have something that we're striving for on a daily basis. So, Jacques, you put this into a book, Driving Out of Darkness. Tell the audience where they can find the book, what they would expect in reading it. Obviously, share the story. I'm sure there's bits within the book that we didn't get into today, and where they can connect and learn more about you and the work and coaching and programs that you have available for people.
I intentionally self-published because I'm a perfectionist. I wanted to do things myself. I actually self-published it onto Amazon. It is a Kindle version, but it's also a paperback version on Amazon, which is available around the world, easy to ship. As far as access goes, the book itself is very raw. It was written 10 months after my accident. That whole 10 month comes up over and over again. I started telling my story by writing the book. And that's where my starting point was. And that's when I started telling people once the book was kind of written. It took me only a month and I had it down. I dictated into a dictaphone, into Word, and actually wrote it out for me. And then from there, edited and released it by the following February. It was out. And releasing the book was partly therapy for me. I don't look to make a lot of money for it. I actually take the proceeds from anything I sell as on my website and the book are all donated to mental health initiatives. So I don't make money on it, period. And there was never the intent to make money. The intent was to use it for myself, to get my story out, and to help people more than anything. The book itself is very raw in the way it's written. I never went back to edit it for the language to make it better. It says, no, my mindset at the point that it was written was important. I put the emotional piece into it. I have actually not gone back and read my book in 4 years. Part of it scares me because I put a lot of the emotional piece into it. Like there's little sections in different paragraphs where I indent it, put italics, and I give you a snapshot of what my head was doing through multiple parts of when things were happening. On this is what my brain was doing. So you have a really clear understanding on this is what really happened in my world. And from there, I go to, okay, how I got home. what happened when I got back? What are the things that I did to deal with not having a vehicle, trying to get back to work, trying to deal with people saying some pretty shitty things to me that disrupted my world? How did I get through that? And then looking at the whole self-care piece is the last half of the book. Whereas these are the things that help me get better. Whether they do or don't help other people, some of them I don't do anymore because I found they didn't help. But there's still things I tried. So I mention them because it might help someone else. And getting in touch with me is actually quite easy. And Driving Out of Darkness is the name of my book, but it's also the hashtag for Instagram, which I'm on a lot. TikTok, not so much. Facebook, I'm on all three. I have what's called Raw and Real, kind of a play on words from Rod and Reel. Raw and Real every Tuesday, Thursday on Instagram. The Raw is, this is the emotional piece. This is the part nobody talks about. And then the Real on Thursday is, how do we deal with that? How do we get better? So that's my Raw and Real program that I run through Instagram. Costs nothing. Go take a look at it. Check it out. I got stuff posted every day on that. And then my website is myname.com. So JacquesDelorme.com. There are resources listed there. And as I said, some of them are affiliate links. I'm very open about that there. But there's also the comment that anything I make on that page, from books that I recommend, stuff I recommend, I donate it back to mental health initiatives. And the intent isn't to make money. The intent is I'm helping people with those resources, right? If people want to talk to me, like, use the contact form, get a hold of me, have a conversation. If you're looking at more formal work, more of a coaching piece, or you want to buy my program, I've got a program on developing a morning routine. It's called Building a Morning Routine. It's a course I launched a week ago. So it's new. I'm looking for people to beta test it, to try it out, give me some feedback on it. So it's still in development stages. It's not expensive. I kept the cost down compared to what it will be when it's done. But there's also an app that goes with it. That's an online app that you can use to keep yourself consistent with, trying to keep yourself going with a morning routine and get some coaching with it, right?
Yeah, I love that. And guys, we'll have all of those links, the book link, the website, the Instagram handles, all the socials plugged down there in the show notes. I think one thing that makes this book a valuable resource, there's a lot of books on personal development. A lot of people out there, prescribing certain things. You come from a descriptive perspective, right? This is what I went through. This is what worked for me. I'm not here prescribing anything to anybody, but here's a story, here's a journey that a lot of people can resonate with. And, I really appreciate the angle that you're coming at it for. And I can tell the heart and intention behind it is to really raise awareness and facilitate real, truthful, honest conversations around men's mental health issues. So, we're here the beginning of June, Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. If you were given a platform, which you have hundreds of stages that you've spoken on, what's the one thing that you want to say to men out there that are right now that are struggling with mental health?
Be willing to have a conversation. If there's one thing that needs to change more than anything, is to stop being quiet and stop being afraid to say something to someone. Sometimes it's easier to talk to somebody who doesn't know your personal story, who doesn't know who you are. That's where I've offered to reach out to say something to someone, say something to me. Start the conversation, because once you start, you find it's really not that bad. I did that for several months where I didn't talk. So I learned it from firsthand of what it feels like and to be drowning in it. And that's what my Raw and Reel's about. I felt like I was drowning at times. I forgot who I was. I lost who I was. I was pretending to be someone else so much with other people. I was losing who I was. And I wasn't willing to do that anymore. I needed to come out of that shell, come out of that cave I was in, stop hiding and admitting that it is okay to not be okay and to have the conversation.
Yeah. A lot of men are there and need to hear that. So I appreciate you and I acknowledge you for the work that you're doing. Last and final question here, Jacques. We end every episode with the same question. The title of our podcast is called The Superhuman Life. This has been a journey for me over the last 7 years of really unpacking and kind of defining it in my own life, but I love to get the guest takes. So on a little bit of a lighter note here, as we wrap up today's conversation, Jacques, how would you define living a superhuman life?
Living with purpose. For me, it's all about living with a purpose. Me, it's about teaching. Me, it's about helping others to get better. And I went into the teaching profession for a reason. right? Because I love to teach. I love to show people knowledge that they may not have that might help them do something. I taught high school chemistry, physics, right? High end stuff. But doing this it's a whole different world than having an impact on other people, where I can leave a legacy behind where I have an impact on other people. That helps me go through life.
Yeah. Amen. Amen to that. Guys, Driving Out of Darkness. Check out the book, link down there in the show notes. Connect with Jacques, reach out, connect, explore. If you want to have a conversation, learn more about what he's doing, or if you're running an event or know somebody that is and you want to have him speak, I'm sure there's a way to do that as well. But Jacques, I appreciate you, man. This is such a needed story to be told. Guys, if what was shared here today resonated with you, and more importantly, you know somebody that needs to hear this. Everybody is going through something right now, maybe not as big of an event as what Jacques shared, but hearing how he was able to process this can be incredibly healing for them. So if you got value out of this conversation, do us the favor and that person the blessing by sharing today's conversation with at least one person. But for Jacques Delorme, your host, Coach Frank, we love you guys. We'll see you in the next one.